Alrighty folks, and welcome to the Chronicler podcast channel. Episode 4, the Xia Dynasty. Last week, we covered the origins of the Xia Dynasty and the legacy of Yu the Great. You know, the flood control guy. Now we will look into what his ancestors got up to and basically the themes of the dynasty, such as the society itself and what evidence we do have of it. Spoiler alert, there isn't a lot. I will start with the timeframes then. The Xia started officially with the rise of Qi, Yu's son, and unofficially it started with Yu, which lands us in the year 2070 BC, and the dynasty lasted until around 1600 BC. The capital of the dynasty was allegedly Yangcheng, which is in today's modern Henan province. Agriculture thrived during the period of the Xia, and that is largely due to Yu's work at controlling the Yellow River and allowing people to be more settled in the Yellow River Valley. Moreover, the smelting of copper and tin to make bronze allowed for larger agricultural yields in the fields, because you know, the tools could be a bit better. And there's a side note here. Bronze was not just used for agriculture, but for producing weapons and armour as well, thus making armed conflicts more favourable to the Xia. This brings me on to our next topic, the military. How did it work? In a nutshell, the Xia would war with neighbouring tribes, defeat them in battle, then all was hunky-dory. The Xia had new vassals meant new taxes through tributes, which meant more money for the state. And the cycle repeated itself. This new wealth through war and agriculture created an environment for social elites to rise and for government to be more stable. Class systems became a thing under the Xia, but at the most basic levels. At the top, you had the royal family, and second were the landowners, and the last was the peasants who worked the land, and then of course you had slaves. Yep, just like everywhere else in the ancient world, slaves were a thing in ancient China. As well as this, in terms of religion, the worshipping of ancestors seems to have been introduced during this time. I think, if the legends are to be believed, Yu the Great has something to do with this. The royal family would often pray to their founding fathers, in this case Yu, and pray for them to overwatch the dynasty, allowing good harvests and good fortune. The evidence for such ancestral worship can be found in the graves of the nobility. They did like to build elaborate tombs, very much like ancient Egypt. A lot of similarities can be drawn between the two. It wasn't uncommon for pets, valuable items such as jade bands, bronze armour, and even favourite slaves to be sealed in the tomb with their masters. Now I know what you're thinking, this is extremely harsh, and you are correct. But it was considered the highest honour to go with your master to the afterlife and meet the ancestors. Kind of like you served your master in life, now you serve them in death. Now did the servant or slave get a say in any of this? Absolutely not. But I mean, you know, you might as well do this with a bit of meaning, I guess. And as well as that, I need to mention this, the slave wasn't killed and then put in the tomb. They were put in alive. What a horrible way to go. Now according to the ancient texts, the Xia dynasty had 18 rulers in total, if you count Yu the Great. Now to save time and energy, by not boring you to death, I'm not going to talk about all of them. If you really want to know all of them, I suggest doing a quick wee Google search. So instead, I will mention the noteworthy characters. And you will be surprised, after Yu, there aren't really any noteworthy characters, apart from 2. Yep, 500 years of rule and only 2 are worth mentioning. The first is Shao Kahn, and I'll say his name one more time, Shao Kahn. He was the 6th king of the dynasty, and his reign lasted from 2007 until 1985 BC. So yeah, quite a while. However, his rule didn't go to a great start. Rather the contrary. He spent the first years of his life in exile after his father was overthrown by a usurper named Han Zhuo. And I'll say his name again, Han Zhuo. So yeah, great start. But what made him noteworthy then? Well, during his time in exile, his mother groomed him to become a great leader. She taught him his birthright, if you will, and how Han Zhuo had usurped power and became a tyrant. She also taught him how to rule benevolently when his time came and how to use military tactics. So basically, he was trying to idolize Yu the Great. Or not idolize, copy Yu the Great. The exile they sought was with a man who was sympathetic to the Xia cause, and he allowed Shao Kahn to build in strength and relative safety. And seeing an opportunity for power in the future, he even gave his daughter's hand in marriage to Shao Kahn. When he was ready, Shao Kahn led a campaign against Han Zhuo and won the dynasty back. But by that stage, it was all but inevitable. Like Shao Kahn's father, Han Zhuo just squandered his position and was more interested in booze and women rather than running a kingdom. When taking back the throne, Shao Kahn didn't commit any atrocities and made sure his soldiers wouldn't run rampant through the streets, restoring peace and stability to the region. The result was that he was welcomed back as a liberator rather than a tyrant. Shao Kahn hated his father and those after Yu the Great, and not for any personal reasons, but more because they squandered their position and responsibilities, thus allowing Han Zhuo to usurp the throne, even if it was only temporary. Shao Kahn is probably the only reason why the dynasty lasted so long. Now, what evidence is there of this? Pretty much none, apart from the sources of such tales written hundreds of years after this happened. But still, not a bad story, huh? The next noteworthy character I want to talk about is the last king of the Xia, Jie, and I'll say his name again, Jie. Now, he is a noteworthy character for all of the wrong reasons. Now, where do I even begin with this guy? I guess I better begin with the formalities. The dates of his reign was 1728 until 1600 BC. How was his time on the throne? Well, I could imagine he said he had a great time, but you know, at the expense of everyone else. Now, I'm going to mention one particular example that I read about. Jie was planning a banquet for him and his political allies, saying that he wanted the best food the empire had to offer. Now, it makes sense, political allies are important, and you need to keep them on site. But the specifics are what made this really bizarre. So, he would make ridiculous demands, like he wanted grapes from the southern reaches of the empire, wine from the west, grain from the north, and meat from the east. Anyone who disobeyed was to be executed. Oh, I forgot to mention, these people only got 1 day's notice to prepare the banquet. Now, the result was, of course, that a few servants lost their heads. The king could apparently tell if his commands were not obeyed through the food served. Jeez, would not like to get on this guy's bad side. So we do know what kind of guy Jie was. He was just basically the worst of the worst. And he found a little sweetheart as well. Surely she would be more level-headed than him, but no. This was a case of someone who was really bad finding someone else who was really bad, and they loved each other because of their wickedness. Her name is Mo Xi, and I'll say her name again, Mo Xi. So Mo Xi and Jie were not like a typical married couple, only keeping to themselves, you know. They liked the company of other people. This was the result of many parties where people would, you know, get to know each other. Mo Xi wanted to create a perfect party arena, like all of us, I guess. The difference was, though, Mo Xi took it really far. Rather than having a punch bowl, like most people would nowadays, she wanted a pool of wine. Yep, you heard that correctly, a pool of wine. Absolutely scandalous. By all accounts, the parties were a blast, and why wouldn't they be? A pool of wine would be pretty awesome and insane at the same time. But Mo Xi made it turn a little sour and became a party pooper. So after waking up with what must have been a killer hangover, she called for the servants who built the pool, then told them all to jump into the pool and drink it all. Those who didn't would lose their heads. Now, of course, this was impossible, but with the fear of death in them, the servants tried to drink the wine, and all of them drowned in the process. The whole kingdom could apparently hear her laugh as she watched all those poor souls drown. 3,000 people died as a result of this absolute insanity. Honestly, humans, can we not be so cruel all the time? Like, please? Now, like I said before, with the story of Shao Kahn, there isn't a shred of evidence to support these stories, apart from not just one, but two accounts of this story written hundreds of years later. But I think they are worth mentioning, as the next dynasty used these stories to justify their overthrow of the current state. This brings me to this. What then can we say is evidence towards the Xia's existence? The answer is archaeology. Now, in 1959, an ancient palace was found in Erlito in modern-day Henan province. This discovery produced numerous artifacts, such as stone tools, pottery, jadeware, bronzeware, horn implements, bronze tools, weapons, as well as bones. Based on radiocarbon dating of the artifacts, Erlito places these artifacts at around the same time as the Xia. Geographically as well, the Xia could very much have been the Erlito culture. This does show a little evidence then that a dynasty existed, or at least some form of central government in the region did. What else then was found at the Palace of Erlito? Unfortunately, there are no written records in this site, only animal bones with some markings on them. It could well have been the basis of Chinese writing, but until proven otherwise, the earliest form of Chinese writing has to be credited with China's next dynasty, the Shang. Speaking of which, while Jie and Mo Xi were enjoying their wee parties, having a blast and drowning their servants, some vassals of the Xia had had enough, and one in particular was the Shang tribe, located west of Henan province. The Shang were growing in strength, as the Xia were becoming weaker, and it seemed now was the time to overthrow the unjust dynasty and establish a new order. Next time, we will look at the battle which brought the end of the Xia dynasty, and you will be glad to know we are leaving the land of myth behind. Looking forward, we are going to be dealing with real history, the facts and what happened. I hope you've enjoyed these past few episodes so far though, and I hope you enjoyed the rest moving through China's very, very, very long history. And that is a wrap for this episode. So what do you think the Xia was like? Is it all purely fiction and myth, or do you think these events actually took place? Let me know what you think. See you next time.